and the buds ready to open. Love it. This is my favorite time of year. Hey everybody, it's Tanya here. I hope you're having a great day. I've got the mic in my hand. Forgetting to do this. Hey Hoodle, McPoodle. Hey, it's Tanya. Welcome to my channel. Today we are creating some watercolor ink art of magnolia blooms. And not only one, but two. Double. That's right. I'm in a happy mood, but mostly because I've been trying to shoot this when there's lawnmowers next door. Anyways, yeah, we're going to play with some Ecoline watercolor inks. And as I say in all my videos, if you haven't heard me say this yet, you will. It doesn't matter what art supplies you have. Pull out your watercolors, pull out regular paints, pull out your crayons or your pencil crayons. Is your art going to look exactly like mine? Heck no. But you know what? That's perfect, because I want you to get out and play and explore and just get some color on paper. That's the whole point of this, is just to have fun and be intuitive. Now, if you want to do a paint along with me, you absolutely can. I've created this as a tutorial so you can follow it step by step, and it's really fun and simple. And that's the whole point of what I wanted to bring you today. And if you haven't yet seen my video, you can have a look at the incredible grounds, spring blossoms, and the walk that I had in Victoria, BC. It was absolutely magical. It was like a Snow White kind of moment. All the animals. Anyway, check that out. And that will give you an idea of what inspired all these beautiful colors. Alrighty, so grab your stuff. Let's get some paper. Let's get some color going. And let's go. Boop. Boop, 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 doop, boop, boop. Today I am feeling really inspired by this one that I did. It's one of my studies, and I love the colors. I love that it looks like magnolias. I love that it has sort of that spring feeling, and the mixture of the colors is gorgeous. Now, the other thing that's a bonus is if you don't have all the colors, you can use your cyan, your magenta, and your yellow. Cyan is blue, and they will make those something similar. Today, what I'm going to use are my favorites. So I have the 390, and this is my absolute favorite. It's a chartreuse green 233, and a brand new one that I just got, which is 508. And we're going to create something similar. Now, I have 6x6 cuts of paper because I wanted small and fun and something to play with. And these make a really nice gift. You can even use them as a card. So it's a fun size, but whatever you want to do is great. As usual, with my watercolor ink, I like to use the Canson XL paper because A, it's inexpensive, and B, it has this wonderful sizing on it that actually will hold the water for a very, very long time without the ink saturating the paper, meaning that you have a heck of a lot more play. Now, by saturating the paper, I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So this, my friend, is why you don't use cheap watercolor paper, because you will in the end think that it's something that you did wrong, but no, it's the paper. So this one, what happened is the ink was absorbed by the paper so quickly because it's 100% cotton, also a very thin, inexpensive paper, and there's no room for the colors to flow into each other or to play, and that's kind of what happened. So yeah, do yourself a favor, try this one out. You might have another one that you really like, and that's perfectly good too. All right, so what you need really is just those three colors, a nice brush that you don't mind getting stained because the inks will stain, and that's just part of what they're going to do. You may be wondering why I have two paintings going at the same time. Well, for me personally, I find that I get really excited by the process, and I like to do multiples at the same time. I'll also have a lot of color, and they do interact quite differently with each other. And honestly, it's a fun way to do a series. It's a fun way to play with different colors, but you don't have to do it this way. You could just do a larger piece. Whatever works for you is ultimately what works for you, and it's perfect exactly how you're doing it. Now, what I want to do is start by creating shapes, and we're going to create a shape like that, and then we're going to build the shapes on top. The way that you get this wonderful flow is by having enough water where the shapes connect, and then the color in one will connect with the color in the next. And that's how you get some really beautiful blending. So you can see in one like this, right, we have where this red is kind of coming up into the blue area, and then it turned it into a beautiful purple. That is the magic of working with inks. And so you need to have enough water for them to connect and for it to flow. Now, the funny thing about the inks is they all have their own, just like watercolor paints, they all have their own level of saturated pigment that interacts with other pigment and water in their own unique way. Some colors really love to push other colors. Yellow, my friend, yellow is the schoolyard bully of the paints. If you have a bit of blue down or a bit of pink and you put yellow, it's going to go whoosh. And that's because we're looking at a density of the pigments pushing, and B, we've got a different chemical interaction happening. So what happens is the ink will push. And so you can use that to your advantage, and you end up with this kind of thing where it pushes the ink away from where it was. So this was initially pink. I put a bit of yellow and whoosh, pushed it out, and you get that effect. So I have my handy dandy mixing chart that I made up, and if you haven't made one for yourself, I really suggest it because it's fun to see all the different colors laid out next to each other. But sometimes you forget, if you put these away for a little while, what colors actually make new colors and the different tones and things that you can get. So I really suggest that because sometimes what you see on the label is not always what you get on your paper. And then you also get a lot of tone, especially in the purples. A lot of variation in tone just by adding water. So that's my little tip for today. Okay, grab your favorite colors. And if you don't have a full line of these, that's absolutely fine. I know they're really pricey. For me, totally worth it because I love them. But if you can only afford a couple, get the basic set. And if you don't have the whole set, that's fine too. Just grab yourself the basic cyan, magenta, and blue, black, and I don't think you need a white for this set. And that will make up a variety of colors for you. Now, these are things you're going to learn over time. So if it doesn't happen today, don't worry about it. Let's just play and see what we get. So first thing we're going to do is get the brush quite wet. Not so much that you're dripping on the page. And then you're going to draw a shape. I'm going to try and do this so that you can see it. Maybe I'll just pull the camera down so you can see the shape once I put it in. I'm going to just start by making a shape, sort of like a rounded balloon, and then dragging it down and making a bit of a stem. Okay, so you can see it kind of looks like that. And then I'm going to put another one here, and I'm not going to join it yet, but I'm going to put something similar, right? I'm not going to join them yet because I want to add the color first. Because I'm using a very light pink, I can put this directly. If you're using a magenta, be sure you water it down a bit because it'll be quite strong. All right, so I'm going to add a couple drops here. There we go. There's the magic. It's going to start moving, and I'm going to add one drop here. And you can see there's a heck of a lot of water on there, right? And so it will just slowly begin to move. And if I don't like that, I will manipulate it and pull it around a little bit. I used a lot of water. You don't need to. You can use a little bit less and go damp. I'll show you on the next one how that's going to work. But I'm going to add some more from an overview, and you'll be able to see what that looks like when they begin to connect. So I'm seeing that the ink is not moving as much as I want, so I'm actually going to tilt my paper. Can you do this? Absolutely. There is no right or wrong. That's the beautiful thing of it. There is an awful lot of water, so I'm going to have a lot of play time and a lot of time to wait for things to dry. If you don't like the shape and I'm not loving it, you can just use the existing paint that's there and even dip into the other piece and paint a shape that you like a little bit better. I feel like I want this one to be bigger, so I'm actually going to go like that. Grab some paint from here and fill that in. Okay, now see I've got a big bobble down here. I don't particularly like that, so I'm going to use it to create another flower and even the joint of the stem. I think there's enough to actually do the stem. There we go. Remember, they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be what feels good for you. I'd like this one to be way bigger. And you can see where the ink was starting to dry already. You get that line? And that's exactly what we want. You'll know when you play with these a little bit that the paper will get to a point where the ink is still fluid and moving, but if you add new ink, you're going to be able to push them around without them being completely lost in the water. And that's that happy golden place where we get all those colored connectings happening. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the blue. Now I did mix it up earlier in a bit of water so that I didn't have too much. So blue and red make purple, and what'll happen is I'm going to get a little bit of color flow in here. Now you see how this is pretty static. It's not moving too much. It's going with the flow of the water. Also, I am not working on a flat surface. I have an old antique table. It's got a bit of dip in it. I like that. See where the paper is. You can see where the water is sort of focused. Now, when I take my brush from here and go to here, the blue will come into this section. So we'll just do that nice and slow, and then you get a bit of a flow here. Now, do you see how tiny that little connection is? That's enough. I also really like it when I have a bit of the thin and the thick, because that's where you get some really interesting things happening. Now, here's where things are fun, is you can start to use your ink and go into the other areas, and you see how it begins to flow and move. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to play a little bit with some more color and see. And this is totally intuitive, right? You don't have to be worried about things looking a particular way. We are just playing. The important thing to remember is when it's wet, you have a lot of fluid motion and things can move around. So I'm going to add a third leaf up in here, or petal, whatever it is. I want this one to be a little bit smaller because I'm going to put a fourth one down here. And see already how simple that is. And it's just pulled the color right into the area that I need. And I didn't even have to do anything. All I did was connect it. And then I think maybe we'll do almost like it's dropping down. Yeah, like that. Oh, and that's beautiful too. Look at that. And then I'm going to put just plain water in the center and see. And that's it. Now, this is where we start the second painting, because this is wet enough that it still has some playtime left in it. Actually, you know what? I think that we might put a little one here, because I see there's a little branch thing here. Bloop. Just a little. And it's fun if you let them be a little jiggy-jaggy, because it looks a bit more realistic. When I was beginning to play with these shapes, this is what I had in the beginning. And you can see it's a little more tight and structured, right? As opposed to something like this, where it's very relaxed and free form, and we're just letting the colors do what they want. I would like to add some yellow actually before I move to the next painting, just because I can see these areas here are, we're going to pull the camera down. So you can see that is the exact state you want your paper at, where there's wet, but it is not soaked, and you have a little bit of extra ink on there for playtime. And that gives you a lot of freedom. You can see how much water we've got going. And this is starting to dry, and if I want to add more color, I'm just going to push the ink down so that it doesn't dry off completely. There, that gives you a really good perspective on how much water. And this is the golden zone. So when we start to add more pigment, this is where we get all the push and pull. So let's do that. I'm using that beautiful chartreusey yellow color. I had one drop in here and then added fresh water to the mix, because I don't want it to be too strong, because that yellow is going to move stuff. When I put it in here, probably won't see too much, but sometimes it will shift the color. So we're going to start here. And then really, again, it's just intuitive. Now, if I put it in the area where all the liquid is, what's going to happen? It will probably push it around a little bit, but there's a lot of liquid, so not too much. But here is where things are going to get interesting. The other thing to keep in mind when you're using these inks, look how this just naturally made the bottom of the leaf. Isn't that beautiful? Now the yellow is going to come in here and push it around. I wish I would have looked at that first, but that's okay. It's part of playing. The other thing that's really interesting is that the inks are super vibrant and almost neon when you play with them right out of the bottle, but they do dry quite a bit darker. So keep that in the back of your mind for later. I'm just going to push that down here. A little bit in here. All right, so you can see this has already turned purple. Here we've got a bit of green because, of course, yellow and blue make green. So this is really just dancing around with primary colors and letting them do their thing. And that's why they work so well together, because when you use 3 different colors to do your work, look how gorgeous that turned out, they will all work together. And then you can come in with an accent color at the end. And my accent color is going to be this one, this beautiful light violet color. And that's where you get some really interesting things. Now you see the yellow I put in here mixed with the blue. So we've got a lot of green. I want a little bit more play into the pink. When you have a lot of water and it dries, you do often get I call it the sunflower broccoli effect. I love this. A lot of people don't love it. I think it gives it almost like a crunchy texture, which I really, really love. This kind of thing just makes me so happy. But if you don't like it, use less water. So in this situation where the water is pooling, when it dries, it will actually get that feathery effect on the edges. Now, this is beautiful the way that it is. At this moment, and the thing that I struggle with the most is I am tempted to get in there and muck it around and play. What's going to happen? It's going to go muddy and I'm not going to be able to work with it anymore. So instead, I'm going to move to the second painting and I'm going to leave this one alone and let it be for a little bit. When this dries up ever so slightly, I'm going to come in with the colors that already exist and I'm going to begin to put them into other areas. First off, it gives it a really interesting, again, like the illusion of texture. But secondly, when you are layering color on top of color on top of color, that is where you get these beautiful mixtures that just work seamlessly. So that's what we're aiming for. Okay, so we're going to move this one aside and we're going to work on the next one. All right, now we're going to do the same process on this one. And I think instead of doing the pink as the base layer, I'm going to do yellow. Okay, we're going to create a shape. Now it really helps if you have a light source that allows you to see the shape you're painting, because otherwise it's quite difficult. If you are unable to do that, then you might want to dilute your pink or magenta very, very lightly, so it's almost impossible to see, but still you can see the shape that you were painting. Okay, so I'm going to do the yellow on this one. Oh, did I get a blop on the end? I did. Okay, so what I was saying about having a very dilute mixture, that's kind of what this is. So I can see my shapes and get them started and not have to worry about figuring out where the heck my water is on the paper. Okay, some blue, gorgeous. Now you can see here I've got an awful lot of water happening, right? And also I'm intentionally mixing it so I can have that green showing up. Okay. And then I might just add some more blue again and let it do its thing. You can see how the inks have pushed each other around and you get that beautiful natural outline and soft and pretty. Okay, but there's still some wet areas and that's where I'm going to add a little bit more ink, and then I'm going to do a little bit of overlay just so you can see. This turned out so beautifully, I am not touching it. She says now, but that's the next step. Here we see the natural mixture of the pink and the blue, and there's a bit of a violet situation happening. I want to come in with this color as an accent and add some little bit of detail and some extra color in areas that are still wet. So I put a drop on my palette, I'm gonna add some water, really diluting it down. And in these areas where it's quite pink, or I mean quite wet. Now I wanna add it without getting too muddy because I love this pink. So if I put a little bit here, it'll move around. Now yellow and purple are complementary colors, which means when you add them together, you get a neutral. When you're doing any work where you need shade and you have yellow, you use a bit of purple. Your mind's eye sees it as a shadow and not the purple. But in this situation, they're going to mix together and you're actually going to get a bit of a brown color. So that is quite pretty. And also something that I want to have happening down here. The other thing that's quite interesting, and you can see it on the edge here, is we had some of the pink and some of the blue, they mixed into purple and they left a purple outline. And this is something you can use in the beginning, thinking about which colors do you want to lay down first and where, and you will get an outline from them. I'm going to put a tiny bit here, tiny bit, don't mess with it. Okay. And the other thing I really like to do personally is I like to put some dots of color because I find they give you a little bit of visual interest, you know? So this little leaf here, we're going to put some dots just randomly. And again, do you see I'm putting the purple on the yellow and to the eye, they look almost brown, right? So it's a fun trick that you can use. Trying to do tiny little dots, tiny, tiny. Anyway, you get what you get. Here I want it to actually be brownish looking. There we go. Look at that. Gorgeousness. Yes, 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 yes. That's the thing that I love. When they start to push each other around a little bit and you get that play of color. And it is so pretty. You do a couple little dotty dots here. And then I'm going to fake in almost like a shadow on the bottom. Here is very dry, so you're going to see that the paint goes down like it regularly would on paper. Cat's always got to come say hello to you in the middle of the video because Cat thinks it's hungry all the time. Yep. Hello. Okay. And some dots there. All right, I'm going to let this dry. Obviously, the cat needs a little food, so we're going to go deal with that. And then we will come back and see what's happening in the other painting. Excuse me, is this the Salish show? Is it? Is it all about the cat today? Feed the cat? You need some foodies? That's the ticket. All right, back to this painting. You can see we are at that magical point where we have pools of water. We also have damp paper, and this is where we can start playing with the pigments. We're getting a lot of flat areas, and I want to just build the color up there and create more depth and a little bit of texture. Also wanted to show you how the ink pushes itself around, right? So we had that mixture of the blue and the yellow, which made green, and look how it pushed itself around. Now we're going to add to that, and the more layers, the more color you build up, the more depth you get, and the more interesting your painting is. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually use the colors that are in the areas where there's a lot of excess water, and I'm going to just add them where I want a little bit of shadow. So we have these natural carbuncles. I'm going to pretend the light is coming this way, which means the shadows are going to be on this side-ish. It's not a perfect science, you know, just mucking around. Now, I want to put some in, but I also don't want to lose the beautiful color, and I kind of just did there, but that's okay. Just playing around. Remember, they always dry a heck of a lot lighter than what you see when you put them down. And you can probably see that from when we did that at the beginning. Okay, I'm going to just do a little of that, like that. Here we have a lot of water. And when you start to mix all these colors together, when you have the pink, the green, the purple, and the yellow, you're going to end up with a browny, muddy color. And in this situation, that is perfect because, again, I want it to look almost like a shadow. But be careful, because if you use too much, you're going to end up with a very dark, muddy sort of situation. And we don't want too much of that happening. What I want to do is lift up some of the different colors and, you know, put them down like a highlight. Here it's dry, we're going to get the dots. Here is wet, and it's going to whoosh into the other colors. And I really like that. Still find there's too much here, and I'm going to try adding that just as a bit of a textury situation in some of the others. Again, I'm saying this to myself mostly, being mindful I don't add too much because I don't want it to be muddy. This one I want to let go. If you feel like you have too much liquid, so if you get yourself a dry brush, a lot of them will just pull the water up. Some of them you have to wet and then strain out the excess, and then it'll tab it out. Here I would like to lift it up, but it's created this incredible teal color. I don't want to mess with that because that's going to be gorgeous. But here, ta-da! Isn't that fun? And then I have that excess on the brush, and I can tap that into different areas. But that's not really what I want to do right now. I'm just going to continue to use the same ink. So here is that magic area that I was saying. When you have that damp paper, that is where you can really start to get colors to push around. This is where we get that depth of color, and we begin to see, as I'm tapping some yellow in here, that this is where you get that really interesting visual play on your eyes. And also, don't forget that you can always grab some color from other parts of the painting that are still wet or damp. Because this is a cohesive palette, all the colors are going to work together, so it doesn't really matter. You can grab some from this area, the other area, mix them, blend them, dot them in, put cross-hatching, create some texture, whatever it is that you want to do. Just have some fun and play around with it a little bit and see what you can create. Now, the other technique I want to show you before I move on is putting a lot of water into a damp area. And what that does is it begins to move all of the ink. And then you're going to end up almost with I'm talking slow because I have to reach the other painting, almost a section like this. So that's where I put a big drop of water, and you can see that it pushed the ink around. So what's going to happen here? We don't know. Now we have to just let it be and let it dry up. And you can see we got a lot more interesting things happening now that we've got colors layering and a bit of texture. This is a little flat yet, so I'm going to just work on that one. Here we are back on painting number 1, and there is still quite a bit of wet area. And remember what I said about the large areas creating that kind of a flat color, but then it pushes the ink to the edge and it looks like that. Now, I personally love that. If you don't, just use less water. That one looks like an Easter egg. How fun is that? Now, this one I think is absolutely gorgeous, except for one thing, and that is, as beautiful as this is close up, from a distance, you're not going to see where the end of the leaf is. And we need to define that just a little bit. So I'm just going to play with a little bit of shadow here. I also have an area here that's damp, which means yay, putting more color, and I'll get some more of that ink layering and texture situation a little bit up in here too. Now you have the choice. Do I want to take where all the colors have mixed together and gotten a bit dark and murky and use that and push it around? Or do I want to go back to the ink straight out of the bottle or even mix my colors together? There's a lot of choices. And I'm going to start actually with the purple. Again, this is, what is this color? 579. And I'm going to use that directly just in here. Very, very lightly, just to give me the idea of a shadow ever so slightly. I really don't want to lose that yellow because it's so pretty. Now my paper is buckled, which means that the ink will flow down. So if I want the ink to flow this way, I'm going to have to put a little placeholder on it, and then the ink will flow down. But right now, I don't mind that. The other thing you can do is get a clean but damp brush, and you have to do this quickly. I might not be able to because it might have dried already, but you can just come in on your edges and soften the edges a bit, which I want to do because I don't like the harsh lines on this one. Yeah, I missed the opportunity, so we're going to put a little bit more of that purple there. And it's going to flow where the water is. So don't forget that. Once you put water in, it will flow, right? So I had to sacrifice a bit of the natural flow and color that is there to get that shadow so that from a distance you can actually see that this is a leaf happening. That's okay though, I don't mind that. And then I'm just going to continue to put some more purple in different areas. Again, there's that purple and yellow mixing together and you get that wonderful neutral color. Now I like what's happening here. I just feel like it's flat. So I might actually let this dry a little bit and then come back in that area and then do this sort of thing here, you know, just to give that idea that there's a little bit of texture happening. This one is still soaking wet, so I'm not going to touch it. If I put any more color in there, it's just going to go browny muddy, and I don't like that. At this point, things are mostly dry, but not completely dry. When they are completely dry, then I can go in and I can actually put another petal in, almost like this situation, and you can layer over top. And you can use the transparency of the top color to give you that beautiful look. But things are too wet right now, so always a cat hair, always. I love what's happening here, but I want to put a little bit of yellow, just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit to say hello, hello, and give it something visually interesting to look at so that it's not just going to dry as a big gray area, because it will. Okay, beautiful. And this area, I think this has got a little bit of, no, that's pretty dry. So I should have looked from the side. That's okay. For me, always an opportunity to put more dots. I like the dots. I'm also going to push some yellow right there. Now, do you see how that looks all of a sudden way more interesting than just having it flat gray, right? Because it's that illusion of depth and your brain goes, oh, what's happening over there? Instead of when you see a flat area, like this painting, which is drying up. This here, see how flat that is? You just kind of don't want to look at it. It all depends on where you want to put your focus, really. And playing with more color on top of color, trying to avoid the dreaded murkiness. Oh, I like that a lot. Yep, yep, yep. Ooh, that just made things really pretty. I like that a lot. Interesting. Here it will go dark because I have that purple. All right. Methinks I am, for the most part, very, very happy with how this is looking. Maybe a little bit more yellow right in here. I'm just going to dampen this area, let it sit for a second, and then put some of this that's already existing into here. If I take some water and drop it into the yellow, it will push the pigment out, and that's where you'll get this kind of like a ruffle effect. But I'm just going to lift some up off on my brush and put it here. Very slight. See how that added a little bit of depth without really doing too much work at all? And I'm going to do the same thing here, but hardly any. Just very subtle. Just want that subtlety of color. Nice. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry and we'll be back. Now in this section, once it dried, I added a little bit of moisture just to get things damp. And I'm tapping in a bit of a red pink color. And this is the pink that's mixed with some of the others on the palette. Don't be afraid to get all the colors mixed together. This is where some of the beautiful things can happen and you can create a bit of depth. And I like this because you don't notice it from a distance, but it does, again, create that visual detail and texture in your painting. Things have now dried up and we have a beautiful shifting of color on this one and this one. Look how beautiful that turned out. Incredible. At this point, we could pretty much frame either one of these, and it's up to you how you feel about your painting. I always suggest to put it up a little bit and then walk back and see how it looks to you visually. For me, I really like both of the shapes, but I am finding that this area here is a little bit flat. So what I'm going to do is just add a tiny little bit of color, knowing that if I add too much, it's just going to go into more of this brown flat purple. But I am going to add just a little bit of detail in here. This one, look how gorgeous that turned out. Look at that. I feel like this one's actually really pretty, and I think that one's going to stay the way that it is. So that's quite lovely there. I do wish there was a bit more texture here from a distance, but you can still see we've got quite a bit of colors happening here. So that's the next step, and then we are pretty much finished. Now, isn't this beautiful how this looks almost like a bud? Again, this is one of those things that it wasn't planned. Remember I put that yellow on there? Well, the yellow picked up some of the ink around it and dried with this edge, and it almost looks like petal that is overlapped, waiting to open, and then I added a bit of pink. So happy surprises really happen all the time when you're doing these. Now, right, so what I want to do is I'm going to add just a little bit of yellow here and see a little bit about maybe putting some cross hatching or something in here just to give it a little bit of texture so we're not so flat looking. Now I'm going to start by adding a little bit of dampness, not a lot. I wet my brush and then I just grabbed some towel and did that to pull off any excess. And I'm going to put a little bit of moisture here. Remember that wherever the moisture is, the ink will flow into it. So just very subtle, and that's about it there. And then I'm going to do the same thing down on here. And a little bit on here. Okay, and I feel like this leaf had such beautiful color and it all blended together. So I'm going to see if maybe a little bit of pink might push it. It might draw even more sort of purpley gray, but we'll see how that works out. The rest of it I think looks absolutely gorgeous, so I'm just going to leave it. All right, let's explore with the yellow. So I've got some yellow, I've got it quite watered down. And I'm just going to put a little bit here. Did not wet enough, but that's okay. It will actually expand a little bit. Right? So that yellow now relates to that, which relates to that, and it just pulls it, it pulls your eye a little bit more together instead of being flat and then not seeing this edge. I'm going to play with a little bit of yellow on here. Very, very subtle, right? So this type of thing, very, very subtle, and you're not really going to see much, but your brain will not think of it as flat. And that's really all I'm trying to do. A little bit of that. And then this one, I wanted to do a little bit of pink. And I'm just putting some in the background so that I don't get too much. Grab a little bit on the tip of my brush and just put a little bit of pink. Yeah, I think that's actually going to dry. I think that's actually going to dry up purple, but we don't know yet. So I'm just going to do that. That's it. And I also feel like a little bit of something here because pink and yellow are going to make a tangerine color, and that's pretty. There. Also, it gives that impression that the leaf has a bit of a shadow in the center here, almost like it's folded, and I like that. Yeah, that's feeling pretty. Okay, I think we're going to let that dry, and we are finished our two paintings. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm back on the other painting, and because I love the way that this one did this beautiful, looks like ready to unfurl petal, I'm going to do that here too. So I'm going to sneak it in. And again, I'm just going to do it almost like that. And then add some water, and we'll see if that works or doesn't work. So put the ink, and then I'm going to just for good measure put a drop of water because that will push the ink out. And because there's more water, I'm going to get a harder edge, and that's what I want to get in this situation. So I'm just going to mix it up a bit, and then we'll see if that looks like what I want it to look like. All right, I'll catch you back when we are dried out. I wanted to add a couple of pretty highlights just to give a little more interest. And so look at that. How pretty did that turn out? This is just with, you can use a gold ink, but if that's not accessible to you, then one of these is really easy. This is just a Jelly Roll gold, and it gives a really pretty soft gold. So that's how we're going to finish the last piece. And just very subtle. I just want a little bit of highlights so that if this is framed and put up, it's actually going to catch the light. And I'm just creating a little bit of shadows and some detail. Really love this, not really cross hatching, but just having a little bit of detail on the stems. Gives them that kind of a woody look. I mean, on this one, I've already done that quite a bit with a lot of different layers of ink. But adding that little bit of gold is really pretty. Just gives it that little extra, right? Gotta love a little extra. Well, there you go. There's the finished paintings. And I don't know about you and what you were able to create. I'm sure it is absolutely beautiful, but I am just loving how these turned out. I think they're so pretty, and they really have that feeling of spring and light and the buds ready to open. Love it. This is my favorite time of year. If you enjoyed this, please do give me a like, a thumbs up, comment, or share. Or hey, if you really are interested and love the content I'm creating, please subscribe. I'd love to have you as part of this little community that is just getting started here on the YouTubes. Haha, I don't know why I did that. It's full of wonderful expletives with wonderful expletives on the side. That's right, that's right. You know what's real fun is when you spend half an hour getting yourself ready, getting the hairs right, pick the right outfit, the lighting is finally perfect, the camera is finally working, and the hair looks good, and the makeup's on, and guess what? The mower, the lawnmower, the shredder, and the blower are all going at the same time. You know, I finally figured out why people hold their microphone like this in the video. It's not because they want to look cool or like they're a reporter. It's because the microphones are crap. How are you today? How are you? How are you doing? How are you looking? Cut that out. Cut that crazy shit out.